Hello Internet, it's Seth Skorkowski, and today we're going to be looking at the classic Call of Cthulhu adventure, Thoth's Dagger. Written by William Hamblin, the adventure was first published in Different Worlds magazine in 1983. It was then reprinted in 1984's Curse of the Chthonians, and then again in 1990's Cthulhu Casebook. It was released a fourth time in 2011's updated Curse of the Chthonians, which is still available in print, links below. Including art and handouts, the current version comes to 27 pages. It should probably take you 2 sessions to play the entire adventure. Our group did it in 1 session, but that was also a 12-hour marathon, so that's not for the faint of heart. Being that it's one of the select few adventures that's been printed 4 times over the course of about 35 years, you would assume that Thoth's Dagger would be one of those perfect and wonderful scenarios. However, you would also be terribly wrong with that assumption. While I love the action and the intrigue and the stakes and the globe-trotting exotic backdrop, Thoth's Dagger has some serious problems. And without making several aggressive changes to it, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone as it's printed today. It runs a serious potential of easily wiping out your party, leaving both the game master and the players feeling pretty unsatisfied. Yet, at the same time, the good aspects of this game are absolutely brilliant, and they kept drawing me back to it even though I had said multiple times, nah, that one's too tough. So I finally ran the game, and I'm very happy to say that we had an absolute blast playing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer my criticisms and suggestions as a game master who has successfully run this adventure.
Hey, and I'm Jack, the NPC. I'm going to give this one to you from a player's side of things. Now, before we get to the spoiler warning, there are 2 things I want to mention to you, and that is pulpy action and dungeon crawling. Now, if these 2 things sound appealing to you, then perfect. But if they don't, then Thoth's Dagger is probably not the best adventure for you.
Ooh, good point. While the scenario isn't the best Call of Cthulhu adventure, it is awesome for Pulp Cthulhu, and anyone that's playing Pulp Cthulhu should probably give it a look. Even then, I wouldn't run this adventure unless you're ready for a possible campaign conclusion, because it is pretty brutal. However, before we go any further into this, let me go ahead and warn you that there are going to be spoilers. We're talking spoiler city here, so any players in the audience that might want to experience Thoth's Dagger, please stop now, but Game Masters, stick around because we have a lot to discuss. Alrighty, now that the disclaimer's done, let's dive in. The scenario opens with an article about an upcoming auction. A famous Boston Egyptologist has died and his library and art collection is up for sale. A few small details in the article might tip the players that the mythos or some other factors could be involved. If they wish, there's several interviews they could do prior to the auction. They're not necessary for the game, but players wishing to investigate first might take a couple idea rolls and everything to kind of help them along, to kind of point them the right way. Don't take too long with all of the pre-investigation, because it's mostly there just to help build the atmosphere and foreshadowing. Now, over 30 people will attend this auction. The module provides profiles for a few of the key NPCs the players might befriend, and it would then accompany them on the rest of the adventure.
However, as an NPC, I'm going to tell you that these guys are nothing spectacular. William Fredericks is okay. I mean, he's not great, but he's okay. At least he's got a 50 in reading hieroglyphics, so, that could be useful. Next is Clifton Jurgensen, and he is a great NPC with the exception that his sanity is only 15. So if he's going to come along on the rest of the adventure with the heroes, he is going to be permanently insane long before the scenario is over.
For my game, I changed Clifton to Claire. That way she could be a possible love interest, or if nothing else, just diversify the cast. I love the idea of introducing some NPCs that can be brought in for the rest of the adventure. However, for reasons that we're going to go into shortly, one of those NPCs should have the skills and the stats that are appropriate for them to be a perfectly playable player character. Also, then print that NPC out on a player character sheet, because you're going to need it later on. For our game, I had a longtime friend and popular NPC that the PCs had met on a previous adventure. He showed up at the auction, and he became the NPC that we used for this purpose. Among the auction guests is Boutros Alkisi, a collector of Egyptian antiquities. The PCs will need to meet and hopefully befriend him here.
Yeah, well, befriending him ain't gonna be easy. I mean, just look at the shadows across his face and the shifty eyes they gave his picture.
The auction itself is pretty simple. Now, don't spend too much time doing the bidding back and forth on any items that the PCs aren't interested in purchasing. Before the game, just note how much each item is going to sell for, maybe anyone notable that's going to buy it, and then once you get to the auction, if they don't want it, just move on to the next item that they might want to purchase. The only problem with the auction is that they only offer 6 items up on the auction block, which doesn't really seem all that good. So for my game, I upped that to 10. I added a gold-beaded necklace, a jeweled ring, a mummy, and then a set of 4 canopic jars.
Now this is a great time for your players to use those appraise, archaeology, and history rolls when they're inspecting the items prior to when the bidding starts.
Now the most important item here is, of course, the ibis-headed dagger. Because it's the only item that has an illustration, don't show them the illustration until after the bidding is done. No need to tip them off that this is the plot MacGuffin unless you just want to. Play the bidding however you want, and it's fine if a PC wins the dagger. Otherwise, it should be won by one of the NPCs that the character is befriended or will be befriending at the auction. Shortly after the auction is done, the PCs are going to be chatting with some of the NPC friends that they already had or the new friends that they're making, and one of the player characters is going to spot a suited man approach the table where the dagger is resting, pick it up, stick it in his jacket, and start making his way for the door. What's important here is that the player character spots him. Then hopefully they're going to cry something like thief or something, and that's when the thief escapes with the dagger. Once he's realized that he's been seen, the thief is going to pull out a pistol, he's going to shoot it up in the air, which is going to cause this big panic, and it's going to block the way so the character can't get in their way. So even if the PC doesn't yell thief, have that person glance over his shoulder, make eye contact with the character, spotted him, and know that he's been made. But the most important thing is that other people know the PC saw him and that the thief definitely does get away with a dagger.
Oh, what do you know? We went to an auction and there was a theft. This has never happened to us before. Come on, guys. Let's get to cracking and solve this case.
Actually, the police completely handle this part. Once they get the thief's description from the player characters, the cops race off to catch the thief.
Wait a second. So the cops solve the theft and we don't have to. What kind of Call of Cthulhu adventure is this?
While they're waiting for the cops to come back with the dagger, the NPCs and the PCs should be hanging out and getting to know one another. Now, if a non-player character was the one that purchased the dagger, they will actually invite the player characters to stay up with them and just kind of keep them company while they're waiting to get any news back. They're going to buy them dinner, they're going to have them a nice evening, and they're going to sit around and talk, maybe share each other's life stories, that sort of thing. The next morning, the police are going to show back up, and they're going to have the dagger and a very strange story. The thief is dead, and the case is apparently closed.
This is like the shortest game ever. Guys, I guess we got enough time. We could catch something on Netflix and maybe, oh my god!
Shortly after this, one of the PCs is going to have a seizure and a vision. The incident is going to cost them 1 sanity. Boutros will tell them at this point that he is actually a Coptic monk who's come to the United States to retrieve this dagger and destroy it. However, since the dagger has now cursed one of the player characters, the only way to save the player character's soul is to take that character and the dagger back with him to Egypt in order to perform the ceremony in order to exorcise what's got a hold of him. So the PCs are going to have to get together and they're going to have to go to Egypt to solve their problem. This is confirmed if the PCs translate the dagger's hieroglyphics or have them translated.
Nyarlathotep. Oh crap, this is going to be bad.
Conveniently, the Ramses, an ocean liner, is going to be leaving for Egypt in the next couple days. If the PCs can't afford passage, have one of the wealthier NPCs pay for their trip. Either with a law skill check, or Boutros might mention this to them, but firearms are strictly prohibited in Egypt. The module sort of breezes past this, but the PCs are definitely going to want to have some guns for once they get there, so let's discuss this a bit. Players have essentially 3 choices if they want to have guns on this adventure. 1, they could complete the legal forms before they depart, and hopefully they'll be approved for a permit by the time the ship arrives. 2, they could try to sneak firearms through customs or bribe their way through customs. Or 3, they could just leave their guns at home and then go try their hand at the black market once they arrive. Boutros, being a good monk, likely is not going to be able to help them with the black market. The players can't spend too much time before they leave because every day at noon the cursed character is going to suffer another vision, each vision stripping them of one more sanity point. While I love the concept of this curse, it's also the adventure's biggest problem. Taking into account the 3-week boat ride to Egypt, the afflicted character will have endured 22 to 23 visions by the time they arrive in Egypt, and at that point they're going to be taking 2 hours a day. That's 22 to 23 sanity points, enough to place that PC at indefinite sanity without them ever having the opportunity to have made a save against it. Additionally, some of the visions will show details that require sanity rolls for the afflicted character to have to roll, which can incur even more sanity loss. This is just too much. The module is essentially making that player character useless as a player character, which is no fun at all for that player or anyone else at the gaming table. So here are my suggestions to lessen the impact. First, make each vision scene one sand loss, but on subsequent visions of that same scene, allow a save. This means that a PC who is at scene 8 on day 22 has only lost 8 points, definitely. Now, of course, they might have lost more depending on their rolls, but that way they're not going to be guaranteed that they've lost 22 sand. Next, for the vision scene that can cause more loss, cap the maximum loss that they can have for that vision at whatever the maximum was if they had failed the roll to begin with. Furthermore, once a PC has started experiencing Vision C9, starting on day 25, a vision that lasts 4 hours, they're going to be so tired and exhausted after the ordeal that they must rest for the remainder of the day. Again, this sounds like no fun at all for the player whose only sin was being the poor sap to have their character turned into a plot point. I have 2 suggestions for this. First, show their exhaustion by having the character receive a penalty dice on every roll that they make after the 25th vision. Now, they can still rest all day to counteract this, but if they want that character to be involved in the game, let them be involved in the game, but just give them a penalty dice to kind of show what their exhaustion is.
Now, the second idea is a bit more extreme. In addition to their player character, who is likely insane and now suffering a penalty dice with every roll, go ahead and hand that player the character sheet for the friendly NPC and let them play both. That way they can still feel like they're involved in the game and somehow useful. Now, of course, if that player has a backup character ready, they might want to let them use that instead. But the point is that you want your player to be able to play the game. And because their primary character is going to be just terribly crippled by what should just be a plot device, and it was no fault of their own, have a backup plan ready. That way that player can still play once their character hits day 25.
Now, while they're on the boat to Egypt, they have 3 weeks to get some studying done. I strongly recommend that you have Boutros mention that he knows the Elder Sign spell and offer to teach it to one of the PCs. Someone in the group will need to cast this spell in order to complete the adventure. Boutros won't be able to cast it himself because a few days after the ship sets sail, he's going to be brutally murdered by a hunting horror. Now, maybe the PCs will see him die, maybe not, and the module leaves that up to you. For my game, I had the PCs see the monster with Boutros' body coiled up in its tail. They then had 1 full round to try to attack and kill the monster before it flew away, and the only attack that it could give in response was its bite attack, since its tail was currently occupied with their friend's corpse. Once Boutros is killed, if the PCs inspect his room, I added a small book among his belongings that included the Elder Sign spell in it. Again, this is a critical part of the adventure that someone needs to be able to cast this at the end. The module just sort of assumes that they can and never mentions it. The other thing that's going to happen on the boat is there's going to be a bungled robbery that will end in the 2 would-be robbers killed before they can make off with the dagger. If the PCs can't stop them themselves, sometimes you just make some bad rolls, have the fleeing assailants, trip over something in the hall or get walloped on the head by the cane of a little old lady or just get captured by the ship's security. Now, the captured robbers are going to kill themselves before anyone gets an opportunity to question them. The ship will finally arrive at the port of Alexandria. This is where they'll experience customs for those trying to get any guns through, either legally or illegally. The scenario offers some good descriptions here, but I suggest that if you can find it, check out the Cairo guidebook. It's got a lot of information about not just Cairo, which the PCs might visit, but also Alexandria and 1920s Egypt in general. The players are going to meet two NPCs here. The first is Muhammad, a guide and translator. He's not essential if the PCs don't hire him, but if the player characters decide that they would like to get some guns or anything else in the black market, I'd use Muhammad as your in for that. The next is the villain, Khalid al-Azi. He'll be posing as Boutros' friend and Coptic monk, Mikhail Sufyani. Khalid will do everything that he can in order to steer the PCs toward the town of Ashmunyan as soon as possible. Now, the PCs might attempt to go to Cairo first, and there's a lot of great stuff there if they can visit the National Museum and get a lot of great background information, but it's not necessary if they decide not to visit Cairo.
The Cairo Museum? Hell yeah, I want to go there. That's where my favorite librarian adventurer works. I confess I might have a slight crush.
Once the PCs arrive in Ashmunyan, you'll need to figure out how to get the player characters out on the street and away from Khalid. Either have them go and get food because there's no restaurant in their hotel, or send them on some errand while Khalid goes on another, like procuring camels for the journey through the desert or some other supplies. Once they're out and alone, a beggar on the street is going to approach them, and before the PCs can push him away, he's going to whisper in their ear that he's no beggar at all, but instead Abbe Shunda, a Coptic monk and a friend of their late Boutros. Now, he's going to tell them that the man that they're traveling with is no Coptic monk at all, is instead a priest for this dark and evil cult. This puts the PCs in a difficult situation of having to figure out who to trust. Shonda warns that the cultists are everywhere in this city, and he offers to get rid of Khalid if they can lure him into a hotel room alone. Now, this plan involves him summoning a dimensional shambler who's then going to grab Khalid and drag him back into the void. This discussion of how he was intending on getting rid of the bad guy was enough to get my players to say,
okay, look, I don't trust either of these guys, so let's just send them both on some little errand somewhere, and then we'll just tuck out of town while they're gone. We know where we're going, and we'll get this curse lifted ourselves.
Now, unless Khalid is properly killed, he's going to summon some sand dwellers to attack the player characters once they reach the ruin of Kamenu. Once the Sand Dwellers are defeated, the cursed player character will be able to lead them from memories of his vision through the ruins, into the Temple of Thoth, through the secret door in the mech, and down into the catacombs beneath. These catacombs are huge. In addition to ghouls, which may be encountered in numbers of a dozen or more, there are giant crocodiles, rats, snakes, and scorpions as big as lobsters, and pitfalls. The module is strangely vague as to what can be encountered here, and it only lists the stats for the giant crocodiles and the ghouls. For my game, I added swarms of beetles that came up out of the ground, and it's just like in The Mummy, because, I love that movie, and beetle swarms are pretty cool. The module actually warns against this becoming some sort of dungeon crawl, which is a weird thing for them to warn against, because that is exactly what this is.
Which isn't a bad thing at all. Coming from a history of D&D ourselves, the occasional dungeon crawl can be a total blast. However, this ain't D&D. We ain't got no healing potions, and we ain't got no clerical magic to make all of our injuries just magically go away. And likely, none of us are going to be wearing any form of armor either. And all those little injuries, they're going to start adding up and adding up. And a lot of these creatures are so powerful that you could easily have a party wipe if you try to run this adventure like you were running D&D.
Now, one leniency that the module does give about the endless armies of ghouls that are coming after the player characters is that if a player character displays Thoth's dagger for the ghouls, they're going to cower away in fear. Now, this is neat and all, but there is nothing that tells the PCs that they can do this. So I suggest either giving them a mythos check or maybe have the afflicted PC make a hard idea roll or no roll in order for them to know that they can do this. For my game, when I had a player character lose his sand roll because they encountered a particularly large group of ghouls, I gave that character an insane insight to keep the dagger, pull it out, and send them away. So keepers, keep this in mind as an option if you find yourself in that situation where you risk accidentally wiping out the party because ghouls are kind of tough. The module explains how Khalid would have been able to survive Abbe Shunda's attempted killing by Dimensional Shambler, and it talks about how he's going to summon the Sand Dwellers, but it never mentions after that what he's going to do and where the PCs are going to encounter him. For my game, once they reached the Temple of Nyarlathotep, he was waiting there with several ghouls that were under his control and wouldn't be cowed away by seeing the dagger. Once that fight was done and he was dead, the PCs went inside the temple. Another problem is that the Temple of Nyarlathotep is barely described at all. Aside from the final confrontation with the Calling Chaos, the only description is the map key, which has 3 madmen prisoners listed on it. I gave the player characters 1d3 sanity back for every prisoner that they freed and escorted back to the surface. There's also a mummy that's mentioned on the map, but there are no stats or anything else given inside the module, so keepers make note. Eventually the PCs will enter the altar room, and Nyarlathotep himself is going to walk out wearing a pretty nice human form. He'll be very polite and simply request that the PCs surrender the dagger to him and they can all leave safely. However, the cursed player character is not allowed to leave because their soul is already his.
Ah, dang. We were doing so well up into that last pot, and I really don't want to fight you, but I gotta save my friend.
To defeat Nyarlathotep, the PCs just have to stab him with Thoth's dagger. That's all they have to do. The module says that if Abishunda is there and he's still alive, once he sees Nyarlathotep, he's going to get the dagger away from whichever PC has it, and he's going to charge the Crawling Chaos, and he's going to stab it with them himself.
Now, keepers, I probably don't need to mention this, but the module doesn't say anything about it, and someone's got to say it. Under no circumstances should you let an NPC just up and kill the big bad guy. The players need to do that. After all, they are the players, and therefore the stars of this little story that we're doing. So if the old priest, grabs the knife and he bum rushes an elder god with it, Nyarlathotep needs to either kill his ass or knock him out before he can even clear the room. And now the players are going to have to scramble for that fallen dagger while all hell is breaking loose, and that makes for a much better story than just saying, well, yeah, then the NPC killed him in the first round.
Nyarlathotep will begin transforming once the combat begins. The sanity loss from seeing him change form is going to be pretty brutal, and remember that the PCs are going to have a low sanity at this point because of all the stuff they've already endured throughout this adventure. Now, during the 3 rounds that it takes for him to achieve this final form, the only thing that he can do to fight back is to fire an energy blast at them, which 1 PC at a time. However, that energy blast is so powerful that it's probably going to be 1 shot, 1 kill for whoever he shoots it against. Now, if the PCs manage to stab him with Thoth's dagger before he's able to change form, they're going to defeat him, and that's going to be no problem. But if it takes them longer than 3 rounds to take the big guy out, they are probably not going to survive this encounter. Once the Elder God is defeated, the PCs simply need to remove the curse. This will require casting an Elder Sign. If Abishunda came with them, and if he is still alive, he can do it himself. Otherwise, a player character will need to cast it. The ceremony is also going to remove several POW points from both the afflicted character and 2 other characters that are assisting with the ceremony. Once the curse is lifted, the adventure is over. Now, it does give some sanity rewards for defeating Nyarlathotep. However, keepers, keep in mind that you're going to want to reward your characters for any mythos creatures that they destroyed or any prisoners that they freed. I also went ahead and added some nice treasure that they were able to find in the priest and priestesses' chambers. Some gold candlesticks and chalices, maybe a cool headdress or something like that. And that's just because that I feel that if you're going to tomb raid an ancient Egyptian temple that's filled with mind-bending horrors, it should always end in a nice payday. Overall, despite my many complaints about this adventure, my players and I had a great time with it. There is a sequel adventure called The City Without a Name, but I don't know yet if I'm going to run it. However, keepers, if you want to have a fun game that's full of pulpy adventure and globe-trotting excitement with lots of intrigue and action, and you aren't afraid to do a lot of aggressive modification and heavy sanding, then you might want to check out Thoth's Dagger because we had a lot of fun.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the review, please give it a like or maybe even share it. If you want to see some more of our reviews and other videos, just hit that little subscribe button. Until next time, gamers, you have a great day. I keep sending love letters to Evie off at the Cairo Museum. She ain't ever written me back.